Welcome, everyone. We're going to give folks a second to sign on. And while we do so, you will see a QR code on your screen as well as a link in chat. You can follow either to download the Frontline Gap Report, which we'll be diving into in just a few moments. If you're just coming on, welcome. I'm Misty Wild, COO of Culturati. For those joining us for the first time, Culturati convenes C-suite leaders, founders, investors, and scholars exploring how culture shapes clarity, execution, and long-term performance. We often describe culture as infrastructure, the system that determines how trust forms, how decisions move, and ultimately how work gets done inside an organization. Today's conversation focuses on the front line, the part of our businesses where strategy meets reality every day. Before we begin, a quick note, this session is interactive. Please drop thoughts or questions into the chat throughout. If we miss anything, Annie on the back end will resurface during our dedicated Q&A in the last 10 minutes. So let's start with one number that immediately caught my attention when I first read this report. 46% of frontline workers do not know who their CEO is. That's almost half of the people delivering products, serving customers, and keeping operations running every day who could not name the person leading the company. That points to a significant structural gap between leadership intent and frontline experience. And here to help us unpack what's driving this and what leaders could do about it, I'm delighted to welcome today's guest, Gideon Pridor. Giddy is the CMO and Chief Storyteller at Workvivo by Zoom. Workvivo focuses on connecting employees across large organizations, particularly the frontline teams who keep operations running, yet often remain the least connected to company culture and leadership communication. Giddy brings deep experience guiding high-growth tech companies and translating complex workplace challenges into clear narratives leaders can act on. Today, he's walking us through one of the most comprehensive recent studies of frontline experience, surveying 7,500 workers globally. Giddy, welcome. Why don't you further introduce yourself and Workvivo for those who may be new to it?
Thank you very much, Misty. It was an amazing introduction. I wish my mother was listening. She would be proud. It's great to be here. We love working with you guys at the Culturati. And as you know, we are all about culture. Workvivo is a company that was created not that long ago, in 2017, exactly with this mission of meaningfully connecting employees. And we mean every employee, from the CEO to the intern, from the person in the office to the majority that work in the front line. And as we all know, it's not fun to say, but they have been traditionally excluded, excluded from company communication, excluding from the need to be engaged or to engage them. And I never liked this word, human resources. Never did, but we have been treating these people as human resources. Luckily, a lot of that is changing now. Workvivo is all about that. It's not changing because of Workvivo. It's part of a much bigger trend that I'm happy is happening of adding humanity to the workplace. And that's driven mainly by expectations of newer generations of employees, something that started and we saw as a huge wave post-COVID.
Mhm.
People wanting to add meaning to their work, and meaning doesn't have to be curing cancer. It could also be knowing the mission and if your company, what's your company's purpose? Did we have a good quarter? Who am I working for? And these expectations have been changing and growing exponentially. We've been lucky enough to be in the forefront of that, delivering Workvivo, which is, we call ourselves an employee experience platform, a modern intranet. Our customers call us the digital heart of their company. It's the employee app that every employee has if they work in the front desk, in the fast food restaurant, in the factory, or in the office. And that's their window to the office, to the people, to the culture, to the CEO, to everything else that goes on. It has become so much more important over the past few years. It has become a standard. We're working with some of the biggest companies in the world, in the US, modern but also very traditional companies. And this is creating a huge transformation. Most of our employees on the platform, millions and millions of them, I would say almost 80% are frontline employees, people that most of which don't even have an email. And this becomes the
Wow.
main IT connection, to the company. We ran the Frontline Gap Report because we couldn't find any other meaningful report. We could find hundreds and hundreds on knowledge employees, but not on these 80% of the people, human beings at work, that get only about 5% of the actual IT investment. We expected to find a gap. We were staggered by the depth of the gap. And we'll talk more about that in this session today. Thanks again for having me.
That's helpful context. So, what I'm hearing is that this research emerged from the patterns that Workvivo kept seeing across organizations, frontline employees doing essential work while remaining less connected to leadership, communication, and culture. And I want to highlight two things that you just said. One, that 80% of the workforce only receives 5% of the IT investment, and two has now escaped my mind, but we'll come back to it.
No, no, you're right. There are about think about it, Misty. There are about 2.5 billion frontline workers in the world. It's about 80% of the workforce in the world. And they're doing the most essential jobs. These are the nurses and the caregivers and the doctors saving lives and people building homes. And the list goes on and on and on. And they're usually completely excluded. And that's been the case for so long. And I'll talk about it further on, but it's not only a big problem, it's a humongous opportunity. I think it's the biggest untapped opportunity for companies today, improving that engagement by 2%. And actually, every research company in the world agrees with that. If it's okay, I'd like to show just like a few numbers, and then we won't have any more slides and we'll have a conversation together. But I think it could get help people, see a little bit of more what we're talking about. So, sorry for that. Just a second.
And while you're
Yeah,
putting those up, you prompted that second thought, which is,
yeah,
you know, shifting from thinking of this as a human resource issue to a human capital issue. And just remembering that, what you're about to show, these are really crazy stats, and behind every statistic are real human beings.
exactly. We always say it that we see the big transformation. Everybody's looking for digital transformation around efficiency. We all talk about AI. We'll talk a little bit about AI today as well. But this opportunity is so big, and it's addressing that human problem that is a human problem. People deserve to have that meaning at work, right? But the business problem that is generated from that is also staggering. If there is one consensus, because people ask me about ROI, I talk to HR people leaders, they get it. The IT comes into play, and they are like, what's the ROI? And there is ROI. If there is one consensus of every research company on this planet, from Gallup to McKinsey, whoever you want to name, they all agree that the highest return on investment comes from employee engagement. Engaged companies perform so much better, save money on attrition, hire the best talent, have about 81% less absenteeism, and about 20 to 30% higher productivity. Surprising? No. If you ever read any CEO or founder book, any book like this in history always comes down to what? To the culture, to the vibe that they were able to. That's the X factor. And if 80% of your people a more in a company, that doesn't apply to them, and as you're going to see, they feel that it doesn't. Just imagine what we're missing out here in terms of that like X factor. So we surveyed about 7,500 people, frontline workers globally across industries, and we found some big numbers. You mentioned one, about 46% not even knowing who their company CEO is, which I think is incredible, because
Wow.
how connected can you be if you don't even know who you're following? who you're working for, all these messages that go through a very polished email that they read a million times. Nobody gets it because they don't even have an email, but it's beyond that. They don't even know who the person is. And I think that's incredible. It's like beyond the leadership crisis, right? And there are other things here that are just interesting, very interesting to see. 50% say that their company cares more about office workers than them. That's sad. About 40% are absolutely sure that the company does not care about them as a person at all, sees them as a working resource. Sad. 87% of frontline workers simply feel the company culture does not apply to them. And 60% say, you know what? We have our own culture going on among the frontline guys. It's a different thing. And the list goes on and on. So it's not surprising that about 57 of the frontline workers would leave their company for another company paying them exactly the same. Hence, attrition, the number one, business risk and loss clause in the world. I don't remember the number, but it's a huge number in the U.S. alone every year. And it all comes down to this. We recognize not one gap, but five gaps. We'll talk about a few. And we divided it as following: a culture gap of them not feeling that it applies to them, a recognition gap. And recognition, you told me this when we were preparing for this, Misty, is so intertwined with culture. Uh,
Hmm.
if you're never getting any appreciation, a shout out, a good word, then it's very hard to care about anything. And that gap is huge. They feel completely unseen, unheard, and unappreciated. The communication gap is about not knowing what's going on. The old intranet systems, this endless email, it doesn't get to them. And that means that the companies simply don't know how to reach these people. A technology gap, simply about tools that don't work and weren't designed for these people, were absolutely designed for people working behind a desk. And finally, a career gap, meaning not seeing any prospect to grow within that company. And all of these were mentioned and highlighted by this staggering numbers. James here, that's helping us in the panel, will continue to share this QR code in the chat for anybody that wants to download and read the full report. No cost, of course. Very interesting and highly recommended. Yeah.
The stats are staggering, honestly. And before we dive deeper into the findings, I'm curious, what surprised you the most when that data came back?
I think that what surprised me the most was, first of all, how conclusive it was. I ran a lot of surveys in my life. Sometimes, you want to tweak it a little bit. You want to get to the number that you want to get to, but here you didn't need to dig. It was like almost a cry for help. It was so obvious. The numbers were huge and across any department. So it was just very significant and conclusive. And it was, as you saw, a big survey. I think it's the biggest survey of its kind that has been conducted, at least in the last 2 years, specifically about frontline connectedness. So, yeah.
Yeah, the consistency across industries is striking. And what the data seems to suggest is that this gap isn't isolated to one sector or geography. It reflects how many organizations are structured. From those 7,500 responses, what should concern senior leaders the most?
Uh, it depends. It depends on who we're talking to. At Workvivo, our champion in companies that we work with changes. It's the chief HR officer or chief people's officer. It's the chief communications officer. It's the chief information officer. And we also talk to a lot of CEOs because they're the main culture agents and communicators in their companies. So they're the main users of Workvivo. In Workvivo, you could do a live stream to 30,000 people, and it's done through that one app. So it becomes the main comms app of the actual CEOs, and that changes. When you talk to CEOs, the culture thing goes above anything else. Culture is the most important thing in a company that doesn't have a dedicated, C-suite like owner. Everybody owns culture, and usually in the best companies, the biggest ambassador of culture is the CEO. In the best companies like Virgin, all the Virgin Group, 40 Virgin companies, they're a customer of Workvivo. In 2 weeks, we are having this big virtual event. We call it the Calm Show, and it's actually being filmed on a cruise ship, Virgin Voyages cruise ship in Miami.
Good.
Just remember that. Yeah, people should join that as well. It's very cool. But, they share the same Richard Branson. He's the founder and the CEO, and he is the culture. Reading that so many of these people working on the ship, flight attendants on the Virgin Atlantic flights, sellers in the Virgin Mobile stores, say something like this is a huge red flag because a guy like this understands that nothing is more important than culture, and culture doesn't live in a handbook, and no, and it doesn't work just because we say that we have a great culture and we do Taco Tuesday. People need to feel it, people need to live it, and you're seeing the vast majority of your people that feel that it simply does not apply. And yeah, that's like about them. But you talk to CIOs and they see a clear indication that the entire stack, the digital workplace, that they invest in does so much, but it just doesn't apply to these guys. It's actually designed for knowledge employees. And in a lot of these companies, knowledge employees are like 10% of the actual workforce. So the other guys in the front line are not connected at all. You know what they actually use? And this comes out of this as well. We asked about 67%, I think that's the number, something like this. They use WhatsApp. They use
Mm.
FaceTime. Their main tool is not a work tool. Talk about risk, talk about like lack of actual reach. They call it shadow IT. So they see these statistics, and CIOs are like, okay, this is like much bigger than anything else that I'm trying to solve. They're just not in the company digital workplace stack at all. How do we solve that?
So let's bring the audience into this, because it sounds like the disconnect is primarily a communication problem, which kind of feeds into all of the other issues with culture and recognition in tech. Annie has a poll for us. Does your organization currently have a dedicated frontline experience strategy? Sorry, the poll jumped in front of me. And while those results are coming in, Giddy, if someone on this call had 2 minutes with their CEO to explain the frontline gap, its significance, and what they can do about it, how would you frame that?
I would start by the gravity, explaining that this, without a doubt, is the biggest unsolved workplace challenge that we have to tackle right now. It might be surprising, but it's the right thing. It's the biggest one because we have the vast majority of our employees today that are at flight risk. And even before that, they are at, quiet quitting risk, meaning they don't give it their best. They don't care about the company. They don't feel involved. Even if they're casual workers and they come for the season, they won't come back next season. They won't recommend their little brother to come and work there as well. And we're missing the X factor. And I would frame it as the biggest uh, the biggest impact that we could actually produce in a short amount of time. If we get the engagement scores for this segment of our workforce up by 1 point, 2 points, we're going to see it in the big numbers. And nothing that you could do can save you so much or improve your customer experience so much as improving your own people's experience.
Mhm. Annie, oh, Annie and I are like this. She reads my mind. So looking at those poll results, looks like the majority somewhat but fragmented, followed by no, then yes, formalized and consistent, and not sure.
I think
Interesting.
it's amazing. Add the unsure, which is like a no, it's like sort of 40%. You have like 90 something percent that don't really have it. You have only 6% that said yes, formalized and consistent. Like think about a lot of these companies. Most companies are either hybrid and have desk and deskless employees, but the bigger ones, and a lot of them are our customers. Frontline, they're Walmart, they're the biggest employer in the world. I think they have 2 point something million, employees. So all of these big retail chains, the big airlines, the big hotel chains. How amazing it is that on this survey, 90% are saying that they don't necessarily even have that as a topic.
Yeah. Yeah. And it looks like the majority that are in that somewhat bit fragmented suggests that leaders are actively working through it right now. From your perspective, what differentiates organizations that believe they have a strategy from those that actually do?
Mm, those that actually, the best indicator, I think, today could be investment in actual technology, something that you spend money on. The problem is that a lot of companies and leaders are talking about it. It's easy to talk about it. I'm saying stuff here that they're easy to relate to. Everybody's a human being, and of course, and it's a human problem. But actually, when you look at it, then it these intentions, they stay within Zoom meetings, leadership meetings, stuck in a handbook somewhere, meeting summary. They don't really do anything transformative about it. You have a so looking at workplace technology transformation, investments that are different and are also taking into account these employees hoping for an equitable digital experience is usually a big indicator. In great companies that I know, they have a person dedicated to employee experience, sometimes under HR, sometimes standalone, but that's what they're thinking about. I always say that in 2 or 3 years from today, it won't be about if you have an employee app, an employee experience app, meaning one app, mobile first, that gives you access to everyone, to everything, and lets you be connected, whether you're in the store or in the office. It'll be which one. Just like before, nobody had a marketing automation platform, and now it's which one, HubSpot or Marketo. Nobody had a cloud-based CRM. Now it's which one? It's Salesforce or Salesforce. But right? But it's happening. We see it. It's happening very fast. It's very the biggest and even most traditional companies are coming to us looking for this today. In a few years, it'll be which one. Companies that don't have anything like that at all, then they could talk about it, but just sending more emails or hoping for the best simply
Mhm.
won't work. Transformation is needed. You talk about AI a lot. AI for frontline is extremely important, helping you swap shifts more easily and find what you need on the spot in order to give a better service in the retail shop. It's the use cases are endless, but everybody's looking at AI transformation. I guarantee to you that the vast majority is not thinking about the distribution of how this incredible AI would actually reach and be at the fingertips of these people in the front line. That's the last thing most companies think about. So technology is a very good lens, and everybody should be thinking about it.
Let's go back to those first two gaps because they're near and dear to our hearts here at Culturati. Culture and recognition. One stat that really stood out to me, only 13% of frontline employees say culture clearly applies to them, and half believe that office staff matter more. Why does culture often feel so distant to frontline teams?
It's first of all, honestly, one of the things that always makes me sad and also makes me feel very connected to the purpose at Workvivo, even before I joined. Uh, I'm a big enthusiast and advocate for like open communications and inclusive culture at work. I don't think that there is anything more important. I think that, by the way, as the same Richard Branson said, that happy companies win. And it's easy to relate to that. That's how the world works. You don't need to be a big scientist to figure that one out. Uh, Culture is about a lot of things. It's not about writing your values in a document and putting it on the wall. It's not about reading about it in onboarding, or passing through training. It's about living it. And you get that by a collection of stuff. Culture is feeling like you know your leaders and CEO. You listen to them. Even if you see them once every year in the parking lot, you feel that you've seen them a lot more. It didn't used to be possible before. It's possible today in digital. How do we make that happen? My parents live in another country. I live in Spain. And my kids feel that they know my parents because they're on WhatsApp and FaceTime with them every day. It's not the same, but when we meet my parents, It doesn't feel like we haven't seen them for 6 months. Amazing stuff that weren't possible connection wise before the digital age. So uh, this is like and these are amazing things that we could like take advantage of today within our companies for sure.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that the culture that leaders describe may not always be what the frontline experiences. The data also shows that recognition outranks compensation and perceived value, which frankly blew my mind. I think it was half that would leave for another company for the same pay if they felt that there was greater career growth and recognition embedded. What does that signal to leaders?
I'm really glad you brought that one up because I think that recognition is the most misunderstood, underrated factor. It's so easy and fun to give. It's so powerful. And we never had a better way to give it. Like what I said about digital before. If before it wasn't possible to go to every factory and every site and say a good word. And today it's very doable. The number one used feature on Workvivo is simply shout outs. It's me giving you a shout out publicly about something good that you did. It's a feature in Workvivo. People get alerts for that and then they chime in. And you have this warm, fuzzy experience of like a day or two that people say good stuff. And it could be about a person, about a team, about a site, and it works. It works amazingly. It actually what makes people go into Workvivo. If you're not there, you don't give recognition, you don't get recognition. But I don't think there's any single factor that is more powerful when you talk about culture and how people feel. It's a human need. We all need it. We don't want to feel like resources. We don't want to feel like we are selling our time in order to live a few hours in the evening. I always say that work life balance is like, it's not a good term anymore. We only have life. Work is a part of it and it needs to be meaningful enough. So, there is this McKinsey study from a few years ago, but it's still very relevant. They asked employers and employees, what makes you so, disconnected? It was in the era of the quiet quitting post COVID. And it was staggering to see that employers can't fix what they don't understand because they mentioned the same factors, but the weights were completely different. These guys, the employers, talked about transactional things, about pay, about the working conditions, right? Days off, stuff like that. Well, employees mentioned all of these things, but the three leading factors, and by a landslide, were sense of belonging, sense of appreciation by my company, and sense of appreciation by my direct and recognition by my direct manager. Everything else way below that. And it sounds surprising but honestly, when you think about it, it's not that surprising. It's very human. Like that's how we live. Why is that not how we work? And today, when we think about digital transformation and stuff like that, yes, think about efficiency and productivity, but think about what can I do in order to X 100 the amount of natural recognition that is flowing between my teams, leaders, and employees today. What would that do to a company?
Mhm. So for the audience, I'd like you to put in the chat one example of how frontline recognition appears in your organization today. And while those answers are coming in, Giddy, when belonging improves, what business outcomes shift?
Um, so there's a lot of research about business outcomes from engagement. It's interesting because, it sounds fluffy, engagement, communication, culture. But I said this in the beginning. When you look at all of the analysts researching this, you see that this is the biggest consensus that there is. Nothing, nothing yields higher business outcome than engaged employees. Nothing. In one Gallup research, they usually do the most comprehensive job at analyzing sense of belonging, culture, and business outcomes. It shows that in companies that are more engaged, where people feel a higher sense of belonging, get this, I think the number is 18 to 43% less attrition.
Mm,
43% is in companies that are more frontline workforce, and there they would see a lot more turnover. 18% would be more, knowledge based, but still incredible numbers. Incredible numbers. It's like just attrition in the US alone is business loss of $1 trillion a year, like more than anything else. It's incredible. And then I said that before, same research, 81% less absenteeism, people losing work or not coming, and a lot more referrals, meaning a cheaper way to hire better people. And finally, it was about 18% in that research higher productivity. Why? Employee experience better, customer experience better, right? You feel like you belong, you care about the outcome. So it sounds fluffy and all that, but any research that you check AI, like do that later, check AI, tell them to summarize every research for you. You'll see that that's the one thing. So you asked me before, talk to your CIO, talk to your CEO, bring that forward, bring that forward. This is what transformation looks like. And today with the digital tools we have with AI, we could take an incredible shortcut towards people feeling like they belong.
Hmm. No, it's hugely impactful. And we used to say DEIB, but arose by any other name. Belonging is an incredible lever for performance, productivity, and making humans feel like they're working for a human company. Looking in the chat here, so we've got shout outs, Sai, Kate, shout outs, Elsa, shout outs, birthday celebrations, anniversaries, baby showers, all of those things important to the front line. I love the baby showers.
It is important. These are people. Like they spent 8 hours a shift in a place. Nobody wants to sell their time. It's been over a century since the Industrial Revolution. We're not there anymore. Nobody wants that. And
Mm-hmm.
employers that don't get that this is a market moment are going to be left behind. Employers that don't, leaders that don't connect to their people directly, like modern age politicians understood that they have to do, even if it's less polished. Why? Because the connection works. You want to see who you're voting for. You want to see them talk. So why not at work? At our private lives, it works exactly like that. And yes, baby showers, it's important. Anniversaries are important. Recognition for a job well done, a funny
Mm-hmm.
moment, an in joke, a Halloween costume, whatever it is. And that happens in the big culture, and it happens in the microcultures. It happens in a
Mm-hmm.
shop or in a hospital or in, a production site. And bringing that to life is incredible transformation, probably even bigger than helping you do your task like 0.3% faster by AI.
Ah, imagine that. Gustavo Matrice, thank you. Yes, recognition through celebration, shout outs. Jan, I love that. Monthly What's Broken sessions. Um, it's such an important part. Managing employees as human beings. Yes, thank you, Jan. We've got our second poll that Annie will pop up now. What most influences frontline engagement in your organization? What do you think most influences frontline engagement in your organization? And while those results are coming in, Giddy, how do recognition, communication, and career clarity reinforce one another?
Mm, well, I think they're both about, I think that the only way that works in communication, and that has to do with your career path as well, is openness. I think that the only thing that works for us today, and then as the generation gets younger, any Gen Z, research shows the same thing. You need to feel authenticity, and you need to feel like you're being told the truth. People became deaf to corporate jargon and all this like mumbo jumbo. They want to be told the truth. So in company communication and like in Workvivo, that's our belief system. We're all about that. Uh, it's important to let people not only hear what you transmit, but to be able to give feedback, to give comments, to actually share their own content. And a lot of companies are scared to open up. Use something like Workvivo, but not only Workvivo. It's a matter of strategy before a matter of technology. But you open up and you say, from now on, we're all in the same network of employees. We're not just broadcasting. And you're like, oh, what if they say something bad? What if they say something against our like values? What if they say something about the CEO? So a lot of times they start with a lot more restrictions, and almost in all cases, and I've seen thousands, uh, it's not happening. And suddenly they see that it's not as scary as they thought, and by giving people trust, people show responsibility, and suddenly communication doesn't only become more efficient, it for the first time becomes a real thing. People listen, people know, people communicate back. You discover communicators and culture carriers in your company that you didn't even know, and they're not necessarily the highest ranked managers. And for your career, we tend to be very good at giving the all the career plans for knowledge employees in an office. We know how to do that. Usually on the front line it doesn't exist at all. So even in the survey you see that in the Frontline Gap Report, that they don't have any opportunity to advance unless they want to quit their job and become employees, office workers, but they don't have any program that shows them how they could advance as a frontline worker in a company, by staying in the same place. Most of the programs that we have in HR are not really, really built for that. And that's a shame because we could retain our best people for way, way, way longer. So they're not the same thing, but both have to do with transparency. That was what the word that I was looking for before.
Absolutely. So Annie reading my mind again. What do we think most impacts frontline engagement in our organizations? Wow, recognition. Okay, A plus for this group. That's
Right answer.
amazing. Yep, you guys nailed it. So before we move to that next session, I just want to kind of wrap up um a few key points that really stuck with me that you said, Giddy. Number one, the three things that have the most impact are belonging, appreciation by the company, and appreciation by the direct supervisors. And then also just for leaders not to be afraid of giving employees, particularly frontline employees, a channel to communicate. Don't be afraid that it's going to go down that negative rabbit hole, because that is not usually the case in your experience.
Misty, it's not just don't be afraid. You don't have a choice. You don't have a choice. Like, don't do it. Be scared, and somebody is going to, move your cheese. That's what's going to happen. It's a Kodak moment. They were like not looking at like digital photography coming, and they almost ceased to exist, right? It happened more times. It's happening now. It's happening with talent.
Mhm.
Anybody that interviews Gen Zs sees it. It's not the
Yeah.
same conversation anymore. If you don't give them open communication, if you don't only give them information, but give them a voice, give them a channel to give feedback, let them listen and know who they're working for, understand and subscribe to company values, mission, purpose, and use. Did we have a good quarter, a good year? Where are we headed? All
Mhm.
of that comes back to a sense of belonging. And you can do that digitally today. Everybody could have the same app. Whatever you choose to use, it's not about Workvivo. But you don't have a choice. If you don't do this, even if you pay a little more, they're not going to work for you. And your best people are going to leave. And it's going to happen. It's already happening. And what's more important than talent and culture, right? So
Mhm.
it's really time to wake up and look at this as one of the most important things that companies need to do beyond just driving efficiencies.
Yeah. Trust breeds trust. We know that to be true. So that brings us directly to the structural side of the report, communication and technology. Um, and I think these three numbers probably sum it up the best. And we've already covered a couple. 40%, 46% don't know who the CEO is. 42% say leadership communication is ineffective, and 69% rely on personal messaging apps to get their work done. And you talked about shadow IT earlier. Um, but going back to that stat about the CEO, what does that indicate about organizational visibility?
And it means that it sucks. It means that like we talk about we try to measure reach and see if an email, what is the open rate for an email that I send through my newsletter system Or, how many people scan the QR code in this physical poster that I put in the restaurant? And in the same time, half of your people don't even know who your CEO is. And so it says that we have a big visibility problem. On
Mm-hmm.
the tech gap, you talked about like the shadow IT and WhatsApp and stuff like this that we talked about before. It's important to have that discussion with people that are usually on the other side, on the IT side of the house, but are increasingly collaborating with, us people leaders, communication leaders that are on this call, that the tech stack as it is not meeting the frontline business needs. It wasn't designed for it. And we see it, 66% frustrated by the communication tools that they're being meant to use, and 65% using personal messaging apps, which I think is an incredible number. So it's on us to get that visibility so they have the work tool that allows them to hear from the people they're working for on the shop level and on the company level. And it's important to give them the opportunity to give feedback at a quick, feedback cycle and communicate with each other again without opening a WhatsApp group. One
Mm-hmm.
of our biggest industries is one of the biggest industries that we sell to is actually airlines. A lot of airlines, from Delta Airlines to Ryanair in Europe to a lot of them, because the use case is like that. They used to all have their WhatsApp groups and all that, and now being able to do that and connect, flight attendants with ground crews and people at HQ in that one place, it's transformational. Ryanair, they're the biggest airline in Europe. They have two things that come to mind: a thing that they have on Workvivo that is called Ask Eddie. Eddie is their CEO. And Eddie gives them an hour once a week on Workvivo live, and anybody can ask him anything. And this person, him, he's there and he's answering. Just the fact that this is happening gives you an incredible trust. The company, it tells you so much more about the culture than writing it on a wall. And then they have this thing called Idea Hub. On Workvivo, they let any employee suggests something that would make the company better. Then they choose something, they actually build it into the planes, like moving the garbage bin somewhere else, stuff like this. And then they do an internal show, like a TV show in Workvivo, showing the whole company how they implemented this person's idea. And they give them a price, like a vacation or something like that. And that's happening. But like these things really build culture. And the importance is they're happening in the same place, the same digital environment that everybody has the same equitable access to in the office, in the front line, on the plane, CEO like Eddie or the intern that started yesterday. Every company needs to work like that, and it'll happen. It's just your opportunity to be proactive about it and gather IT and gather comms and gather C suite and talk about this transformation rather than waiting till you need to respond to it because you're the last one that hasn't.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of equitable access, I love the chat is going off, and we'll get to some of these questions regarding part-time versus full-time in 7 minutes. But I do want to point out a note that Kate put up on, she says, certainly believe in the power of recognition and a fantastic culture, but in the world we live in with rising costs, I think compensation has to be taken off the table for people before people recognize other things, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And amen, absolutely. People have to have, a fair and equitable living wage. Any comments on that, Gideon?
Yeah, I completely agree with Kate, but I can only try to tackle what I can tackle. Like technology won't solve that. And of course, like that wages need to be fair, and somebody that is being underpaid wouldn't do a great job or would eventually leave. The interesting difference between that and all the other factors we talked about is that the other factors that we talked about could actually be dramatically influenced uh, without necessarily paying more. So it doesn't come instead, but this is about something that you could start to do now in parallel. And it gives you
Mhm.
a lot of power. Give these people the access, put this app in their pocket, connect to them culturally, embrace open two-stream communications, leadership teams that we'll talk about that in the next Culturati summit, actually, that I'm
Mhm.
speaking at. that need to get from behind the get into the front from behind the curtain and not just hide behind big corporate emails and be there and speak to their people through these new tools. All these things are unavoidable over time, but they could be dramatically impacted today. In parallel, I agree that compensation is extremely important.
No, absolutely. And perhaps for our purposes today, we're starting from a baseline assumption of fair wages, and maybe we need a part two to dive into how we address the inequity there, because absolutely agree. You know, if you can't feed your children, then a birthday cake in the office is not going to cut it for sure. Um, so poll number three, where do frontline teams primarily communicate about work? And then while Annie has that up, I kind of want to underscore the severity of the risk with shadow IT. It's not just lost knowledge, it's in our digital first world, there's a huge risk behind it. Katie, can you expound on that?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at this again from a governance perspective, how serious is shadow IT?
And it's very serious. It's one of the biggest risks. You should think about the amount of policies that companies have. I'm thinking about us at Zoom. Workvivo, by the way, is a Zoom company. Zoom acquired Workvivo 2.5 years ago, and we have so many policies, for privacy, security. You think about the amount of effort that companies are taking. We're a knowledge employee company, and you think about these companies that employ hundreds of thousands of employees, and they're trying to solve stuff, data leakage, security, but then you try to optimize all of this within the actual stack that IT is managing. And I don't know, 70% almost of the communication is not even going through IT, which tells you that you have a problem at a different scale completely, because you can't even optimize that. You don't even control that. And that is a huge problem. One of the biggest wins that a company could have is transferring that 70% into an actual company tool. That's again another huge aspect of transformation. And we've seen incredible cases of before and after. But of course, if you have the vast majority of communication happening inside the company technology environment, then you've de-risked massively.
Right. Results from that last poll. Yep. WhatsApp, text, personal apps. So I think I think that speaks for itself and what we're talking about. And we're getting close to our last 10 for Q&A. So the last gap that we're going to talk about, and Stephanie provides us a wonderful segue here, is career growth. And 54% would leave for clear career growth. Only 13% see a clear path at this time. And I think something that's really interesting is 37% say they would decline a desk job. So career growth doesn't necessarily mean, moving into a white collar knowledge worker role. What does that mean? What does career growth look like when advancement doesn't mean moving to a desk?
In most companies that treat frontline employees as resources, in some industries like retail, a lot of them are being replaced from season to season, and we're used to think like that. Unlike when you think of your knowledge office employees that you want to retain and grow and invest in. I'm generalizing, of course, but frontline workers want a career path where desks aren't the only destination. 80% of the jobs in the world are frontline jobs, the most essential jobs, right? Um, so the system was designed for office workers or knowledge workers, but it's really important to give them the chance to see if there's anything beyond uh, beyond what they're doing now. Otherwise, I think we're completely missing a trick. Career clarity isn't nice to have, it's a retention strategy. We know that when we look at our office or knowledge employees, frontline employees are not different. And if we don't have a program like this in place, you're absolutely missing a trick. So, yeah, I think that's an incredible opportunity as well.
hmm Yeah, no, that's an important shift in perspective because I think many organizations do assume that the only upward path leads towards corporate roles. But the data suggests that many frontline employees want progression within frontline work itself, which doesn't even necessarily have to be super supervisory, but mentorship perhaps.
Yeah, I think we should stop defining as like HR leaders, people leaders, defining success for frontline workers as leaving the front line and moving to the desk. We need to create specialist tracks, senior roles, team leadership paths that keep expertise in the field and to programatize that at least to the level that we're used to, with the programs that we have in Workday that are normally designed for the people that we have in the office, make the career path visible, simple, mobile, accessible on the app. So every frontline worker can see what's the next step look like, and how to get there. Yeah.
So we're now at our Q&A portion of the session. Annie has dropped some behind the scenes that have come through in private messages. You're welcome to directly message us or drop them in the chat. Um, we've got one here. Laura asked, if a person is middle management, how can they bring this subject to the attention of the C-suite?
There isn't an easy answer for that. Mm, but I think that I think that the best bet would always be to write something meaningful, write a meaningful manifesto that explains it, and through whatever channels you have in your company, try to bring it forward. If you have a feedback loop system, where people give feedback, then send it through over there and try to get visibility. The way that there isn't an easy answer because it's much easier to do it with your direct boss, and it's much easier to get to C-suite if you are already like a senior leader. That's the way corporates work. But the way that I like to do it, and I'm a storyteller and marketer for the last 20 years, is to do something different. Don't just send a letter, record a video, uh, have other people participate in the video, make it meaningful, add emotion, send it. Something like that is probably harder to ignore because C-suite don't get videos like this from mid managers in the company that want to share something as strategic as this. So I would like go for something hard to ignore that brings the human out of it and try my luck there, try my luck over there. But I think it's beautiful that you're thinking along these lines and you care. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, get creative, be human, and use this data. I mean, this is really pretty powerful numbers that connect directly to business outcomes. Um, so another question from earlier in the chat, Kate asks, do we know how recognition is defined for people? I think recognition means different things to different people.
Um, yeah, it does mean different things to different people. You could learn about recognition through survey-based employee listening tools, and they're phrasing the right questions. You get answers that you could benchmark, and even if they're not accurate because you do define it differently, the important thing in benchmarking is that you could see a change over time. So if part of your engagement survey addresses recognition as it should and usually does, whatever you're using, a Glint or Peakon or Qualtrics or Workvivo, we also have an employee listening tool inside the platform. Then however you define it, Kate, think about it that you do see the progress over time. And when you start to implement transformational programs like opening up the communication digitally and having recognition days and having managers expected to recognize their team on a regular basis on the system, stuff like that, you will see the graph going up like this because people will feel the difference. So it's not about the definition, it's about the trend over time. And we see that going up, you're doing something very, very positive.
Mhm. And connected to that, Stephanie says, it's interesting that recognition is seen as more important or more impactful for retention and engagement over career growth slash development. We see consistently in exit and engagement surveys, learning and career growth are the primary reason that people leave or disengage. How do you see this tech enable growth and learning?
uh, Enable growth and learning. So just to make sure I understand the question, so she sees that in their engagement surveys, they consistently see recognition and the things we talked about on the top, and she's asking how a platform like this could support learning.
Mhm.
So the way that it works, the way that we see it, the HR stack today is very, very fragmented and people don't like the tools. So any tool out there, the Workdays, the ADPs, the ServiceNows, they're all struggling with adoption. That's the way it is. We built Workvivo as a very wide platform that has engagement at the heart of it. It's built like a consumer tool that is supposed to engage people and make you effortlessly use it. So we have customers like Dollar General, 200,000 people, retail, right? And they have 91% adoption. So you get to a benchmark where everybody's actually using it. That's really important. And why am I saying all that? Because once you get to have one employee app or platform that people are actually using, not like the intranets that everybody hates and nobody uses, you could start using that as a path in order to create usage in other specialist tools. You could integrate it to your LMS or learning and training tools and use the prompts in your employee app in order to make sure that you're doing your training. If I'm not on the tool, you could chase me about doing the whatever training and I won't see it or I would ignore it. If it's happening in the app that I'm actually using every day in order to start and finish my day, there's a much higher chance that I can prompt and push you in order to finish your trainings, your courses, and all that. So, learning is one example. There are a lot of other examples. What's important technologically is to create that heart, that front door that everybody actually uses voluntarily on a daily basis. From there, through AI, through integrations, you can make every workflow, every tool, every task uh, reach a much, much higher level of adoption and compliance. And learning is a great example for that.
Courtney asks, did the importance of priorities shift between full-time employees and part-time employees?
Yes, it's a great question. And we have to be honest with ourselves. The answer is absolutely yes. Not all frontline employees are the same, just like not all knowledge employees are the same. You have nurses that they're frontline knowledge employees in a sense, or people that work in pharmaceuticals, right? Eh, we have big customers like AstraZeneca or Novartis. They have hundreds of thousands of people in the front line, but they're actually knowledge employees. And then when you look at other frontline, then you have also like a lot of types and they're absolutely not all the same. So in manufacturing, you have people that work in the same company for 30 years, and you have an incredible interest to retain them and to make them as bought in as possible. There, we see an incredible impact. Eh, and then in retail, you do have casual workers that, join for Black Friday and leave, or join for the season and leave. And you could do a lot about that as well, but it's not the same. It's not the same level of focus because these people are going to leave. Why is it still important? I wrote an article in a publication about this recently because they're still serving your customers. Have them bought in, have them understand the values, what you stand for, why your brand is better. They'll represent your brand amazingly, even if they're there for 3 months. They'll have their little sister come and ask for a job there and not with a competition. They'll come back next season. So is it important? Across the board, obviously you have a lot more ROI when you're looking at these non-casual workers. especially in these critical industries that I mentioned before. And most companies, unfortunately, are missing that trick. Huge opportunity.
Well, I know we're at time and we've got a few more questions coming in. If we didn't get to your question, we will include that in our recap and recording email, which will come out tomorrow. Giddy, any final thoughts for leaders listening today?
Yes, I just want to say that I hope I wasn't sounding too negative because we were talking about a lot of problems, but I actually look at this with a lot of passion and positivity and enthusiasm because I think that wherever you see a huge gap or five gaps in terms of the frontline gaps that we talked about today, Misty, we're also seeing a historical opportunity right
Mhm.
here to make a shift that simply wasn't possible. It wasn't possible 10, 15 years ago. This move towards digital, yes, it has its challenges. Some of us work hybrid or remote, and we find ourselves in front of a Zoom screen and forgetting to eat lunch and then thinking about stuff like connection and all that. That happens. But it also gives us this incredible opportunity to actually connect everyone in the same place in ways that were not possible before. Give that recognition to the person on the factory floor, or connect directly to all of these people so they could take their app out and see the CEO speaking and get inspired and feel connected to that Richard Branson in my Virgin example. And if you're not seeking that transformation today, you're missing a huge trick, and you can't avoid it for long because the people that won't, the companies that won't, will become less and less and less relevant. And AI even enhances this more. Seek AI transformation, but think about that huge segment of frontline employees if you're that kind of company as well. And from the get-go, right out of the gates, think about what use cases would transform their work. How do I put it in their hands? So it's a huge opportunity, and it's your opportunity to collect the relevant people in your leadership, IT, comms, HR people,
Mhm.
CEO, chief of staff, and think about this together as a strategic transformative initiative. And it'll go a very long way.
I love that final reframing because it is, the numbers are stark, but it is also an exciting opportunity. Giddy, thank you so much for grounding this conversation in both data and practical insight. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. Take care.
Thank you.